If you think about just the TV show alone, I mean, ending the show with a prayer and all these things happen with the books and podcasts and all the stuff Sadie does and that we've all done, like hundreds of millions of people all over the world have been touched. And I can trace all that back to, one conversion of two people in South Arkansas.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Crisp for Movieguide, and this is Coffee and Conversation with Willie Robertson.
Cheers.
Willie, your parents, Phil and Kay Robertson's inspiring true life story is portrayed in the box office hit The Blind and is now streaming on Great American Pureflix. For those who haven't seen it, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's awesome, and not just because we made the movie and it's been a success, but I think the message that it puts out is, I think, a message that needs to be out. It's a message that needs to be out for marriages and the gospel and what God can do, how to change, someone's life. And it's all in there. It was a hard movie to make. We had to get it right because it was our family, and it was Corey and I and our production company's first movie to make. So we learned a lot in the process. But I think it hit all the marks that we wanted. Mom and Dad were happy about it, even though it was tough for them to watch. I think in Christianity and probably generally in life, we're always like, hey, your past is behind you and it's all the future, and we're looking ahead unless they make a movie about it. And then we just live there with the worst season of your life. But I think Dad knew, as we talked to him about it, and it was important to share that, to see where he was. And man, we have just gotten so much feedback from people and how it's helped them, and people have restored their lives. There's been mass baptisms, and just it was really well received, and just I think a message that needed to go out. I think especially to men, and just to show that a lot of the things we get ourselves into, sometimes we don't know how to get out. And at that point in Phil's life, the only thing that could have put it all back together was just faith in God. That was it. Everything else seemed hopeless. And that happened, and we are thankful that happened. It changed my life because I was able to grow up in a completely different situation. My family stayed together. Dad was able to then focus in on his business, Duck Commander, which led down the road to Duck Dynasty, which led to, probably pretty much everything I do right now. In fact, even talking to you. And we've been able to touch through with the gospel. I mean, if you think about just the TV show alone, I mean, ending the show with a prayer and all these things happen with the books and podcasts and all the stuff Sadie does and that we've all done, like hundreds of millions of people all over the world have been touched. And I can trace all that back to, one conversion of two people in South Arkansas that nobody knew who they were and all that. So pretty cool story, which is why we wanted to memorialize it and put it in a movie.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Welcome to Nashville, y'all. This is an exciting adventure.
Your family, they're not in the way. They are the way.
Willie, you're also a New York Times bestselling author. You're kicking off your brand new book, Gospeller. What is a Godspeller, and can anybody be one?
Gospeller is an old word that used to be very in vogue, and people used it all the time. And over the last couple hundred years, it's kind of become a dinosaur even in our vocabulary, which could, probably a lot of symbolism there as far as people sharing their faith. But it means someone who simply shares their faith, either personally or publicly, and not necessarily pastoral, but more just like common people. And so, a couple of years ago, they were like called known gospelers. They were known for always sharing their faith with people. And I can't even claim the word. I was writing the book and I didn't know what I was going to name it. And my wife, Corey, found the word. And she came into the room. She says, Willie, I found this word. It's the coolest word. I've never heard of it. And she's way more studious than I am. And so she knows a lot of words, even though I can beat her at Scrabble. She's way smarter, but I'm a better Scrabble player. But found this word Gospeller, and I was like, that is an awesome word. And so so I thought, well, that's going to be the title. We'll see if we can bring this word back. And then the subtitle is turning darkness into light, one conversation at a time. And so when I think back to Dad, it was one conversation. It was an old preacher who went up to a bar and shared his faith with Phil, had it start a conversation with him, and that's where it started. And then his life went from darkness to light. And yeah, all my chapters rhyme with Gospeller. So the first is Swamp Dweller, and that was how Dad Phil, he was out in the swamp running from police and all that, and until the gospel got a hold of him. But yeah, so it's kind of a 3-part book. I talk about my gospel story, and then the gospel story itself, and then the responses to the gospel. So it's kind of a blend of a lot of stories in the New Testament, especially when it comes to that point in time where people are changing their lives. What was said? I want to know what was said in the Bible, and then I've put a lot of stories in that I've had over the last several decades of my life where I've been able to share with people, and a lot of them are just crazy stories, where it's like it ends up, and it's changing their lives, and then now I can able to see, how the gospel has changed their life as well. And so, because when I talked to people, they were like, I would love to be able to talk to someone about it, but it was like we have so many excuses as to why we don't. And so it's like, well, I don't think I know the Bible well enough, and I don't know if I have any of the right answers, and I don't know where to start. And so I try just to break those down and say, hey, here's some ideas, and here's some ways, just like we would do with anything, whether it was outdoors or cooking, or, it'd be like, the main thing you got to do is just get in there and start, And so I love to cook. And so I use that analogy because it's such the more you do it, the more experience you have, and you can make it look easy. And like, my wife does not cook a lot, and so she's like reading the back of a box, and like smoke's pouring out of the stove, and she's like, I can't do this. And I'm like, yes, you can do it. And so I feel like sharing our faith is the same way. Maybe we had some awkward conversation one time. We're like, all right, that's not, I can't do that. And I'm telling you, the more you do it, the more you know. You do have to study a little bit. And, I've got it down to about 7 scripture texts that I usually share with people. And I'm like, if you can learn 7 kind of texts, then you can sit down and talk to someone as well. And it'll become captivating once you do it. And then you'll be so excited, one, when you see someone's life fundamentally change and you realize, man, I played a part in that, that can really motivate you. And I think that was Jesus's whole message, was to share with other people. And so I don't think he came down for us to be inwardly focused on ourselves, because he wasn't, because he's like, I came for you. And remember, he told Zacchaeus, I came to seek and save what was lost. And so I think it's such an important message, especially today in the world we live in. And, I talk about like the conversation, it starts with caring. We have to care about people enough to even have a conversation. And so what I find today is that we're struggling with even caring for people. And I think the internet and everything, like, we can see more of people, and you're just like, I don't even want to be around people anymore. And it really is. It feels like that. And so, but we got to remember that we were all like that at some point. We were all unlikable and undesirable and messed up, and and that's what I love about Christianity, is that it's that hope. It's that hope that you can change and be something different. I've witnessed it in my own life. I've witnessed it in tons of people's lives. And so yeah, I just felt like the message was now. I felt like God put this on me, and just for this time is to say, hey, we need something, and we need to break out. And I think if the church starts really sharing their faith, we can see some revival, as far as if we get out there in our workplaces and with our families and start actually having some answers for people, rather than just throwing stones at the other side or talking about how bad the world is and how crazy everything is. And I'm like, I get it, but we weren't called to be bearers of bad news. We were called to be speakers of good news. And so that's what the book's about.
That's so true. What inspired you to write Godspiller?
I think one of the main inspirations was thinking about my parents and thinking about, had that not happened. And I was like, had that not happened, my whole life would be completely different. I mean, everything I do, talking to you right now, is like, this wouldn't even have happened. And so then I think, well, God, how many people out there just are walking around lost and clueless? And so, and then I think, during COVID, I wasn't out traveling, so I couldn't speak, because mostly what I do now is speaking to different groups and churches. And so I kind of just found myself here and was like, well, we were fortunate in Louisiana. We could still meet most of throughout COVID. We still met as a church. I think we were shut down for about a month, but yeah, I went up and talked to a local group, and I started teaching a class on sharing your faith, and it was extraordinary. Just it was because so many people came into my little classroom and they wanted to know what do I tell people, and so I had this whiteboard and I would write it all out and I would show them. Kind of the way I do it and where I start. Here's a way you can start. And so if someone comes to you, listen for clues, listen for people who say like, oh, I'm so scared, or I have no hope, or, I don't understand life, or, there's all kind of things that can come, or my kid's in trouble and, where'd I go wrong and where am I at? And so, started teaching that class. And then I had a friend who's in the publishing company, and he saw what I did, and he said, you should put that in a book. He said, I've never seen it quite like you do it. And because he said it's so simple. It's like, I think people think it's so complicated, like you have to be some theologian and know the whole Bible, and which is not the case at all. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have knowledge, but I think about like a doctor. Like a doctor knows all these things. He's went to school for years of his life. He's been in practice. The words are this long, of like what describe all this. But at the end of the day, if you go in and you're diagnosed with something bad, he goes, here's the problem. Here's a solution. We can fix it. Are you willing to give it a try? And that's pretty much what it comes down to. Now, after you get the diagnosis, you're going to learn everything about whatever that is that you have. Over the next year of your life, you'll know more than you ever dreamed of. Over the next 10 years, you'll know even more. You'll have talked to other people who have that. So, and I feel like that's kind of how the Christian walk is. But at the beginning, even though the doctor knows so much, he's got to be able to talk to just a regular guy and say, hey, I got to, because if he started with like the medical books and all that, he would lose all of us. And so, so it's kind of the same idea with telling someone the gospel, and it can be, everybody's story is different. And so, there's people who's been hurt by the church. There's people who've been damaged by their family. There's people who are maybe steeped in sin, or they've made awful decisions. So you just never know where the conversation may start. And, but I found that a lot of people are looking for answers, especially today. People are looking for answers. They put their hope in politics, and they've been sadly let down, and they're like, well, I thought that was going to fix it. And they put their hopes in a lot of things, and we just see like, man, and there's those, so they really are searching for answers. And I think COVID definitely affected that as well. Everything we thought was reality and normal just got turned upside down, and we saw a lot of bad come out of that. A lot of just messed up people, who realized then, marriages fell apart. It was like, what do we do? And the whole career I had where I thought, my whole life was defined, and now that's changed. And so, I think we as believers, we need to have those answers. The Bible says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. And I just want to be prepared to do that. When Jesus left, in the Great Commission at the end of Matthew 28, he says, make disciples, baptize people, and teach people. Those are the three things he told people to do as he was leaving. And so I just wanted to live my life where I was around at least all three of those. And if I'm going to make disciples or baptize anyone or teach someone, I'm probably going to have to open my mouth, and that's going to have a conversation. And so that's kind of where the book, in my backwoodsy way, is trying to get that message out.
I love that so much. In your book, Willie, you write, as a young child, I knew my family's priorities were faith, family, and ducks, in that order. Growing up, I witnessed one of the greats witness. Talk about your father ministering to anyone and everyone who would listen, proclaiming the gospel privately and publicly, and the impact it had on you.
Yeah, he did. That was a big inspiration for me, was just watching him. And when he said faith, family, and ducks, he said it, but he also lived it. And so I knew that he would drop everything he had to be able to share that faith with whoever and anytime. And so I just watched that over and over, week after week. This was not a Sunday morning only situation. It was most of what I always saw was on Monday through Saturday. And once he got known for that, once he was a known gospeler, I didn't even know the word, but that's certainly what he is. Once he got known for that, then what happens is people start bringing people to you. And so kind of like a doctor, they'll start going, hey, you need to go talk to that guy. And so, man, people they would drag people down there to the end of that river where we lived and drop them off, going, go talk to Phil, see if he can help you out. So
That's amazing. Willie, what would you say to someone who says, I don't even know what the gospel is or the good news is, and how do I share it?
you should probably get the book. Yeah, we'll answer those two questions.
Get the book.
Yeah, get the book. Yeah, you certainly need to know what the gospel is, and so that's one of my key. That's a whole chapter in there, and it bases out of 1 Corinthians 15, right at the beginning of it. It's my favorite chapter. When I sign my name on a book, or if someone wants me to write a Bible scripture, that's always the whole chapter, because I love the way it starts. Because Paul reminds people what the gospel is, and Jesus died and was buried and was raised, and so he starts there. He ends with, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? And so he ends with death, which I've, that's in the book as well, which I've read to people when they call and say, I've got a bad diagnosis, or, or I don't think I'm going to live too much longer, which I've had that happen. And those people are always desperate for the gospel. They're ready to hear it. And so, because now the clutter of life is gone, they're at the end of their life. And so it's hard to sometimes get it down to where the importance of it is there. And so, and as you share it, I'm just going to give you a bunch of examples. It's like, I mean, if I gave you, if we're talking about cooking again, if I gave you a cookbook and I just said, figure it out, well, good luck. I mean, the information's in there. But if you watch me cook with the cookbook open and you sat with me and watched it, you'd probably learn a whole lot more, because there's a lot that's not in that cookbook, that we kind of read through and say, and there's kind of a base knowledge. And so I'm going to give you stories. I'm going to try to teach you this is the way it can happen. John chapter 4, the woman at the well. The woman comes up. Jesus, here was the big theological question he asked her. Can I get a drink of water? That's where the conversation started. So if you can ask someone for a drink of water, then you can start a conversation and be a gospeler. That chapter ends with the entire village coming down and meeting Jesus and following him. And so that's where it started. And so, and that's one of the big stories in the book, because Jesus taught like a master class on how to do that with this woman who he probably shouldn't have been talking to. And his disciples were like, why are you talking to this woman? And so, because he cared about her and he got into her story, and then she found a whole new way to live. And she was probably one of the first gospelers, because it's in John chapter 4, so it's early in the Gospels. And so, but yeah, she took that and then went and shared it with someone else. So yeah, those are all in the book. Those stories are in the book, and I think it will teach you certainly what the gospel is, and then some ways to maybe help generate and create something to have that desire to actually want to share that.
Absolutely. There's a saying, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
Mhm.
Really, what encouragement can you give someone who feels I'm not called or gifted enough to share my faith with others?
I've been using this example recently because it kind of made me laugh, but I thought someone who said it's not my gift to talk about Jesus, if you're married, you can think about this. If you told your spouse, you know what, I'm never going to mention you to anyone else for the rest of my life, and then tell your spouse the reason you're not doing that is because that's not your gift, and just see what she says or he says, and see if they'll agree with that you're not gifted at that. I think when and there's a lot in the New Testament about marriage, and I talk about that, like the marriage and the mystery of Christ with the church. And so, when I talk about my spouse, I can't help but talk about it because we talk all the time. And so it's like, my wife said this the other day, or, so I'm going to reference her a lot. And I think it's the same way with Jesus. You don't have to, you just jump in there and you just tell people what he does for you. And hopefully you have that relationship with him. If you don't, or if you find yourself with nothing to talk about, I would go back to the beginning and say, make sure that you're in a relationship with them. And you just start, you just see where that goes. And if you don't know the answers, that's fine. That'll hopefully inspire you to say, hey, let me dig deeper and find that out. And I did that when I was 14 years old. People would ask me things and I was like, I don't know the answer. And so I wanted to go study. I'd go ask dad or I'd ask someone else. And the more I've done that over and over and over, you get so much better at it. And at the end of the day, even if they go like, hey, that's not for me, I mean, I appreciate what it does for you. It's not for me, but I'm just a seed spreader. I'm just planting seeds, and Some will hit, even the New Testament speaks of that. Some will hit and grow, some won't, but at least I'm giving them a chance, at least I'm, speaking what has worked for me and what I know is what I believe. And so, and that's what we're called to do.
Yeah, I love that. The first words in your book, Willie, are a quote from the Bible, God's word. Talk about the importance of planting God's truth over the world's lies in our hearts and in our minds.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing we've got to do. You've got to actually know what it is and know what truth is and what you believe or what you don't believe. I know this, if you're not sure yourself, about where you stand with God, you're never going to tell anyone else about it. And that goes with anything in life. If I'm not really sure, I'm probably not going to talk about it. And so, and that's probably that's where I find a lot of people, they're just not sure. They're like, I'm hoping, we were talking about asking people if they're married, and it'd be like here's the thing. If I ask you where you're married, you would probably say yes or no, or like, it's pretty obvious. But when I ask people, do you have a relationship with Jesus? Here's what I hear. I don't know, or I think so, or I hope so. And so I always get tickled thinking about if you answered that about marriage. Are you married? I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. I haven't thought about that in a long time. It'd be such a bizarre response, right? And so, so I do think we've got to get back to the word. And so my whole message in the book, it's not my opinion. It's not, this is what I've deducted. I'm just laying out literally some Bible scriptures and context and saying, read this. And when I show that to someone, it may be the first time in their life they've ever read the Bible and then applied it to their life, which is going to start a discipleship as well. And so I want them to read that. I'm not trying to talk them into anything, I'm not judging them at all. Most of the time I don't even know who they are. And so I'm like, I'm not judging. If this hits you, and if you believe this, and if you've deducted that you want to do this, so I want to read them those scriptures. And again, I only have like seven that I generally. If I need more, I'll go to more. But I don't give people too much because I can only take in so many things at one time, and so I feel like if I just dump it over them all at one time, I think so. I just want to get the main thing, the gospel, where they are, do they have a relationship. Here's some ideas, some components and responses of what I read, and then I'll leave it on them. Some of these conversations last an hour. Some have lasted for 3 decades that I've been talking to people about this. And I haven't given up on them. I'm still here. They can always reach out. And they may call me when they're 82 years old and say, you know what? I cannot get this out of my brain, and I think I'm ready. And so I want to be a harbor for them to come back to. Because again, it's on them. They've got to make that choice.
Well, I love that so much. Willie, you and Corey have 6 children, and your kids are launching into their own careers, and they're using their platforms to share the gospel. What does it feel like seeing what started with your dad now being passed down to the next generation?
Well, I think it's probably what, the greatest thing we want to have happen, right? Is, I mean, I want to be in a great relationship with the Lord. That's great. The next thing is I want other people to have that as well. So that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I want to share that with other people. When it's your own kids, it's even sweeter, and that's really what you're pulling for, is that they, one, gathered what was the most important to you, which is your faith and that thirsting after God. And then once they put it into practice, and then lo and behold, what's really awesome is when they teach you something. And so I can remember when I'm like, I think I just got taught something by my kids spiritually, which is amazing because you've been hoping and teaching them their whole life. And so, and then what happens is you become co-workers in the kingdom of God. And it's unbelievable. It's just amazing when that's the case, because they can still come to you for advice, and they can still come, but then you're watching them and you're encouraging them as well. And so, and then you keep passing that legacy, that gospel legacy down to more. And so that you've kind of done your job on this earth. And that's really what that's what I want to do. It's like inspire them, but I can take it beyond that. I can help other families change as well. I can participate in that, and just like that guy did and helped with my family when there wasn't those back people, there wasn't that legacy of that. And so in many ways with my family, that's where it started with my parents. And so I baptized a guy like last year, and I said, well, this will have a big effect on your kids. And he said, Willie, I don't have kids. I said, yeah, but you may one day. And if you do, this should make a big difference in their lives.
Talk about the privilege and the responsibility of parents and grandparents leaving a legacy of faith.
Yeah, I think that's what it's all about. I mean, I think we've got to be able to pass that down once you realize that importance, because I think what's happening is, if you look at the numbers, a lot of the next generation, like, we're going down, numerically, I guess, in churches, or however you want to look at that. So we're losing our kids to the world. And so, and that's a shame. It's a real shame. Now, we're going to go after them again and try to get, those people back. But, I think we've missed a lot of time at home, and a lot of time I think COVID taught us that, like, we're just missing those times. We get so distracted by all the other things in life, or we're saying with our lips that our faith is most important, but really by our actions, we're not really living that out. Really, for some people I know, sports looks like it's the main thing. That ball practice is the main thing that we've got to, education. It can even be good things. We can push people to, we just want to make sure they get the best college education, and you look at the priorities and you can see what's most important. That faith is down there. And so sometimes we don't even ask about their faith. And then we wonder why they took off and lost their mind when they went to college. Just because we actually showed them through our actions and through our words that it really, wasn't that important. And so, I think it's important. So that's the easiest way to pass it down. If not, you're going to have massive revivals to get people back. And so, it's going to be harder to go get them, go grab all those ones that just fell away to the world.
If you enjoy videos that follow your values like ours, and you want to help us continue, go to movieguide.org/donate, because we're actually a nonprofit. You may not know that, but we're working in Hollywood every day to help families have more choices that follows their values. And also subscribe right now.